that's the key right there, isn't it? Just saying you do and it'll come.
And episode 6 was without doubt the hardest episode of the bunch.
Yeah.
We knew early on that there was some kind of army conspiracy, but then when we broke that down, we realised conspiracy is much more interesting when they're about people. When you break it down, you go, actually, there's just 3 people. That seems more interesting and more human than everyone's in on it, which always feels a bit networky and a bit hard to grasp. And we knew the end was going to be a big showdown. We wanted to be epic. We're talking about a Hitchcockian sort of conflict on a ski lodge with the idea we couldn't afford it. So it's in the forest, which is better.
It is better, but yeah. It's when the best. What was the question? Of sort of the best bits. It's when they all start to come together, really, isn't it? It's when
what's your favourite bit?
I don't know. I very much like the end, but that's only because it's the last thing that I saw. It's the last thing I can remember. I liked all the stuff with Eve and her dad.
Why do you want to meet me here?
I was at the doctor's down the road there, and I just I just ended up sitting here.
Is everything all right?
Ever since you were young, you followed in my footsteps. Joining the army, climbing the ranks, even getting into country music. Your mother always said it was because you looked up to me, but I always knew that wasn't it. It was just that we were so similar, so much like the same person. And I'm sorry about that. I've been a good dad, haven't I? I want you to remember me as a good dad, the man who indulged you, who pushed you so high on the swing. Your mother nearly had an aneurysm. You remember that, don't you?
Of course I do.
Soon, I won't remember that. Soon, I might not even remember you. There'll be pieces missing. The doctor said parts of me that fall away. But even if I can't remember you, love, please, whatever happens, what anyone says, if ever... remember me for the good things.
How difficult was the Alzheimer's side of things? Because Roger Allam just blew my mind in some of those scenes, but also there was, due to the cleverness of the writing, there was parts of it where you thought, is he more self-aware than he's letting on, and he's playing a game with the audience and with his daughter?
Absolutely, yeah, especially in that very last scene. Roger Allam did an amazing job, especially in that very last scene with him and her. And he's, I mean, for me, in that moment, he's clearly, you know, he's laying it on. He's thinking, oh, God, I've got an escape route and I'm going to take it.
There's moments of lucidity, and it's the fact that he can pick and choose how lucid he is at any given moment, which is kind of interesting. And the fact that his ultimate salvation is the fact that he is going to ultimately forget everything, and that's sort of a relief for him.
And the hardest thing with that story was making it not comedic, because there's a world where you've got a guy going, I'm going to do this. What are we having for breakfast?
Oh my God.
Sort of quite...
There were cut, yeah.
There were versions of drafts.
What are you doing here, soldier?
Yeah, but he pulled it off, which was a very good thing.
God, yeah.
How much involvement do you have in casting? Because Keeley Hawes and David Morrissey, as soon as I heard those two names, I was watching The Missing, whether it was good or bad. You know, it turns out to be brilliant, but those two names carry a lot of weight in the TV world.
Well, we exec it as well, so we're involved in all of that. And actually, they were the first two people we had on our list when we wrote the script. So we always try and write in our ideal sort of member of cast for character, who that could be, and they were top of our list. So we're very lucky to get them.
I never meant for any of this to happen.
You never do. You never think. You just act. You approach everything like it's the army. Don't think, don't question, just do! And keep moving on!
I needed you. You're not here, are you? And if I could take it back, I would. All of it like that. I'm so sorry, John.
Touch me!
When you watch the DVD, which people will have to hear in this interview if they haven't already watched it, I've got my copy. Shall I open it to a today?
Yeah, man.
But
treat.
are there clues? Because obviously we weren't sure what we were looking for at the beginning, but if you watch now from 1 to 8, are there clues in there? The one clue I picked up on quite early on was Roger Allam saying to Laura Fraser, your sister will kill me if I don't ask about the baby.
Yes.
And I thought, that's an interesting one. And then, of course, it turns out she's a surrogate. But are there other things patchworked along that we wouldn't have noticed the first time?
Definitely, and I think back when the episodes were longer, there were more, but
Yeah.
I mean, we finished all the scripts before we wrote, but even as we were shooting, we were rewriting all the time and adding little layers and little things. So everything was planned in advance, and I think the joy of rewatching it is you can definitely see that in every line or look. And when you know what's happened, I think some of the moments are actually improved by it, when you know why.
You know where they're headed and what that person's lying about, the performance feeds into that and all that stuff. You know, stuff we all talked about because all the scripts were ready before we shot.
Why that scene in Moat in the Hospital when the parents see Alice, or Sophie, for the first time is so sort of uncomfortable and awkward, which is, in the moment when you first watch, you think it's because she's been away so long, how do they talk to each other? Of course, in retrospect, you realise that scene is completely something else, but I think it still works, which is what's interesting.
Yeah, even the very opening paramedic scene when, you know, she says her name and she's actually answering the question previous to that. You know, like, so that explains how she got that wrong. So hopefully it all adds up. We did put a lot of time into it.
Bitte, Fräulein, sprechen Sie mit mir. Wie heißen Sie?
Please, help me.
English. Can you tell me your name, please, miss? Is there someone we can call for you?
Sophie. Giroux.
Sophie Giroux? Who is that? Your mother? Your sister? Who is Sophie Giroux? We will try and find her. Can you please tell me your name?
I mean, what does shooting abroad bring to the show? I mean, this could be a show set anywhere in the UK. What does shooting it abroad bring, apart from it looking fantastic?
I think it's looking fantastic. It's isolation, the fact that these English families are not in their home country, they haven't got the same support networks you would elsewhere. It's that sense of brooding isolation and otherness that just infuses it with a slight sense of mystery. Those woods in Germany, and we went to the British Army base in Germany, and one of them in Bergen, which is obviously where Bergen-Belsen was as well, and all these woods that we use a lot, they're surrounding the whole army base. It's also right next to Belsen concentration camp. The whole place is very, very spooky and ominous without having to do too much.
Yeah, the themes for this one primarily, we were like, this is about freedom and, you know, being trapped and imprisoned and stuck somewhere you can't get out of. And you go to these places, these military bases, they're all stuck in their own little environment. They're all hemmed in. And so it sort of spoke to those themes as well, which was a neat thing, as well as looking very sexy.
As well as things.
It does look fantastic. That and Planet Earth are what HD TVs are for, I think. When you sit down, though, what do you find most daunting about writing a piece like The Missing?
Having to look at Harry for
10
hours.
Wow. It's knowing that you've got 8 left. And when you're at 4, you're like, it's okay, I've got 4 left.
And also, some things come so quickly, and honestly, some things you can get stuck on.
But yeah, the tiniest thing can take you 4 or 5 days, and then you can do a huge big turn that will just you'll fix in a morning, you know. So
episode 5 was quite quick, and episode 6 was absolute hell.
That took forever. 5 took
because 6 had so much in it, it was just trying to bridge gaps between certain things we needed to know, but that hallucination sequence we had to really, no one wanted to do.
No one wanted to do that. We had to really fight for it, and it was sort of everyone sort of gave up. We just kept saying it, and they went, all right then.
It won't be very good though. So something you can get stuck on the silliest plot point. I think the intimidating thing is when it's the beginning and there's so much to add up, and you go, oh, we're going to get there.
And the pressure of the first one does weigh on you a little bit, because you're like, oh god, I want it to be as good.
So are you together the whole time? Do you sit there and write together, or do you go off and do your own things? And
We plot
and come back.
together, yeah, and then we'll write bits of it together, bits of it apart, but all the plotting and all the figuring out what we're going to do, we'll do together.
So would you consider a third?
It's the same. It's the same as I said about this, how we did the second one. Is it would have to have that idea, and I don't think I have that idea. The last thing we want to do is leave a bad taste in the mouth after getting away with it the second time.
I mean, I sort of want to do it, and I sort of don't, if that makes sense. After seeing how all this went down, and it is fun to write when you see it all come together. It's so satisfying.
It really is.
And we love Julian Baptiste, so I don't think it's unlikely that we'd see it again in some iteration. But
it will be a few years. I think
we need a bit of time to sort of, think about other things and come back to it in a way that was...
Just make sure it's as good, I think that is the main thing.
I think we would like to do one at some point.
Yeah.
There's no rush. I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
So you've got Liar coming. What can you tell us about that? When is it coming? And how did that come about?
That's filming now with Johan Griffith and Joanne Froggatt, and it's for ITV. It's coming out next autumn, and we wrote that one on spec last year, was it?
Yeah.
Last year. It's a thriller, I would say.
I would say so.
Much simpler, much more straightforward. I think after Missing, we're like, let's do something that's linear and just characterful, linear story. And then we've got Relic as well, which is a thriller told in reverse, which is...
You don't like to make your life easy, do you?
That one's even harder than Missing, and that's
ridiculous.
Just doing our head in.
You can stop at any point, you don't have to make it.
No.
People make us stop, that's the thing.
Yeah.
At some point people stop me and go, those guys.
Yeah, we'll stop at some point.
So we're grateful, really. But it is very, very hard, that one. And it's looking good, though, I think.
It's very dark. That's very different. It's very sort of heightened, noirish kind of thing.
Quite gothic.
Bit gothic, sort of shades of Sin City or Blade Runner, and it's sort of trying to get away from the more naturalistic sort of grim thriller, isn't it?
It is,
a bit more genre.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the introduction of the part that Ben Shenan played in the direction as well of this second series, because he's sort of done things on Channel 4 that are quite claustrophobic, and I feel like he brought that to the series of The Missing. What do you think his job was there?
Yeah, I think it was a really hard job.
It was a very hard job.
And I think, for someone who hadn't had a ton of experience, I think he stepped up and did really well and had a lot, to learn on it, as I'm sure he'd be the first to admit. But I think he brought a lot of... he used to make documentaries, and I think that helped a lot. He had a sort of documentary interest in it. The characters, the level of sort of forensic detail which you need when shooting them is complicated.
Keep the authenticity.
And he had, apart from anything else, he had a real passion for it. He loved the first one. It was his dream job to do this one, and I think that helped keep you going over 105 days.
It's a mammoth job for any director. I mean, normally they get blocks of two different people on 6 episodes. One person across 8 is a gargantuan task. So I think he did amazingly for, given he hadn't done something of that size before and that many, that big a cast as well.
Huge job.
Were you inspired at all by Nordic noir? Because the music choices and the way it looks, and even to an extent the storytelling seems to be in that area. Is that something you take inspiration from?
I think the first series definitely was. It was sort of just coming big at the time, and so we wanted to keep that for this series round.
Absolutely, keep that aesthetic as well, mainly.
The ability to tell something slowly and take your time to let your characters develop, that seems pretty important. That's definitely part of it. I think you can see it even on that.
Absolutely.
How walking across the bridge is a pretty obvious nod to The Returned in episode 1. So absolutely. But hopefully, I think this one perhaps, the first one perhaps closer to it in some ways. I think this one perhaps had more nods towards almost outright horror at times. Moments a bit more extreme.
Yeah.
Just our attempt to see how far we can push it this time around, I think.
Not that you ever get a chance to sit down and watch it, but what are your favourite TV shows?
Well, we grew up watching ER and Friends on Thursday nights, so they will always have a special place in our hearts. I think Breaking Bad is not one of the all-time wonderful shows ever.
Yeah.
I never watched it a second time because I never have, and I'm really worried I won't enjoy it as much.
No, apart from missing, which you should watch on DVD.
Second, third time.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah.